The Mafia Boss found the Black Maid quietly rewrapping his sister's gift and understood the tears. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to Marissa Thompson. The night was quiet in the Hale estate, the kind of stillness that made every small sound feel louder than it should. Behind a half-open door on the second floor, soft light spilled across polished hardwood, catching the faint shimmer of silver wrapping paper. And there she was. Marissa stood alone at the gift table, her posture careful, almost reverent, as she unwound a fresh roll of ribbon. Her fingers moved slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of a tenderness that didn't belong to a simple household task. The paper crinkled gently under her touch, a sound so delicate it felt like breathing. She didn't know anyone was watching. She didn't know Dominic Hale had paused in the hallway after noticing the faint glow from the room, a room no staff usually entered at this hour. He had intended to remind himself what he'd bought his sister for her birthday, something small but personal, wrapped earlier in the week. But now, from the doorway, he saw Marissa peeling away the old torn paper with a surgeon's patience, smoothing out the edges as if she were tending to something fragile. The torn wrapping lay beside her, marked with a faint scuff, the kind that came from hurried shoes or someone passing by without looking. It wasn't her mess. It wasn't her responsibility. And yet she breathed out softly, almost like a quiet apology to the gift itself, and continued working. The overhead light gilded the curve of her cheek, catching a small sheen near her lashes, something she brushed away quickly, hoping no one would notice. But Dominic did. He didn't step inside, didn't speak. He watched the way her hands trembled just slightly when she lifted the velvet box inside, checking to make sure nothing had been damaged. He watched her rewrap the gift as if it were meant for someone she cherished, and he wondered why a woman who had so little would pour so much of herself into something that wasn't hers. A soft breath escaped her, half steady, half broken, as she tied the final knot in the ribbon, a small bow, elegant and understated. She reached out and touched it gently, almost like she was touching a memory. Dominic had seen efficiency, duty, even fear in the actions of people who worked for him. But this was different. This was care. This was grief wrapped in silence. He stood there longer than he meant to, unable to move, unable to interrupt a moment that felt like it belonged to her alone. And though Marissa didn't know it yet, something in him shifted, quietly, like a lock turning. Tonight, he had come to check a gift. Instead, he found a truth he wasn't prepared for. Marissa did not hear Dominic step away from the doorway that night, nor did she know how long he had been watching her before she wiped the faint shine from her eyes and tucked the ribbon's tail neatly beneath the bow. By the next morning, she had buried the moment beneath her usual quiet routine, holding herself with the same gentle composure that made her seem almost transparent as she moved through the house. She arrived before sunrise, as she always did, her shoes soft against the stone entryway, her uniform freshly pressed despite the long bus ride and the hours she had spent the night before finishing extra cleaning work in her small apartment. The Hale estate was waking slowly around her. Light poured through tall windows, brushing over polished banisters, and the faint scent of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Marissa carried her cleaning cart down the hallway leading to the study, pausing only when she saw a small stack of Evelyn's mail left near the table. It was crooked. Someone had rushed through earlier, she assumed, leaving envelopes in disarray. She straightened them instinctively. She had a habit of making small things right, even when no one noticed. Especially when no one noticed. She worked in silence, dusting shelves lined with books Dominic kept organized by color, though few people knew that detail. She handled each item with deliberate care, the same care she had used while wrapping his sister's gift. But this morning, something inside her felt heavier. She had caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror before leaving home, her eyes rimmed slightly pink. She had hoped the quiet bus ride would settle her emotions, yet the ache still lingered, rising and falling like a tide she could not reason with. She paused near the study window, letting her breath steady. She remembered the velvet box in her hands the night before. She remembered how her thumb had brushed the ribbon the way she used to smooth the hair of her younger sister, Leah, whenever she tied bows on birthday presents that were far too small, but filled with love anyway. The memory pressed against her like a weight. She blinked hard and moved on. As she adjusted a vase on the shelf, she sensed movement behind her, a soft shift of air. Dominic's reflection appeared faintly in the glass of the window, tall and composed, his expression unreadable. She turned quickly, startled, nearly knocking into the table. She steadied it with both hands, her breath catching. "Mr. Hale," she said softly, her voice composed but her heart racing. He did not respond immediately. Dominic studied her the way someone studies a painting they suddenly realized they had overlooked for too long. Calm, reserved, almost too still. "You are here early," he said finally, his tone neutral. She nodded, unsure if she should explain further. He stepped closer, not imposing but observant. His gaze flicked briefly to her hands, then to her face, as if searching for something she was trying hard to hide. For a moment, neither spoke. The morning light framed her silhouette, and something about her quiet posture, the way she held herself together despite whatever storm lived behind her eyes, made Dominic's chest tighten with a feeling he could not yet name. Marissa lowered her gaze respectfully, unaware that the very silence she wrapped herself in was the thing that drew his attention more than any words could have. And though she tried to move on with her tasks, Dominic remained where he stood, watching a woman who had spent her whole life trying not to be seen. Marissa felt the weight of Dominic's stare long after he stepped away from the study door, leaving behind a silence that pressed gently against her thoughts. She tried to continue wiping the window frame, but her hand paused in midair, the cloth hovering over polished wood. Something about the way he had looked at her unsettled her, not with fear, but with a quiet recognition she did not know how to process. She finished her tasks with practiced care, returning each item to its place, smoothing each surface until it reflected the morning light. When the clock in the hallway chimed, she made her way toward the service kitchen to prepare the mid-morning tea tray for the staff meeting. It was simple work, the kind she could do even when her heart felt heavy, and today it helped keep her breathing steady. She arranged the cups, added a small plate of lemon slices, and was reaching for the sugar bowl when Evelyn Hale entered the kitchen, bright and warm as always. Marissa straightened immediately. Evelyn smiled at her, the same open smile she wore whenever she visited her brother's home. "Good morning," Evelyn said, setting her bag on the counter. "I heard you were the one working late last night. Thank you for everything you do." Marissa nodded politely, unsure how to respond. She felt her cheeks warm, but she was careful not to show more emotion than necessary. Evelyn continued. "Dominic said the gift was beautifully wrapped. I have no idea who fixed it, but it looks perfect." Marissa froze for a heartbeat, her hand resting lightly on the tray. She had not expected him to say anything, let alone praise the work. She lowered her eyes modestly. "I am glad it was acceptable, Miss Hale." Evelyn chuckled softly, unaware of the tremor in Marissa's voice. "Acceptable?" It looked like it came from a boutique. "I swear, you have magic hands." Marissa forced a small smile, but inside something tugged at her chest, a bittersweet pull that reminded her of birthday mornings with Leah, the way she used to fuss over ribbons and bows until her sister laughed and told her it was too much fuss for a $5 present. Evelyn gathered her things and stepped toward the door. "Really, thank you. It meant a lot." When she was gone, the kitchen fell into stillness again, and Marissa exhaled slowly, grateful for the privacy. She lifted the tea tray, balancing it carefully, and began the walk back toward the hallway. As she rounded the corner, she saw Dominic speaking quietly with his assistant near the staircase. His expression was serious, but when he glanced up and saw Marissa with the tray, something softened around his eyes, so subtle she wondered if she imagined it. His assistant stepped away, leaving Dominic alone as Marissa approached. She lowered her gaze respectfully, trying to slip past him without drawing attention. But he spoke her name gently, almost cautiously. "Marissa." She stopped, gripping the tray a little tighter. "Yes, sir." Dominic studied her face with the same quiet intensity he had shown the night before, but this time there was no confusion in his expression, only understanding. For a moment, she felt exposed, as if he could see the memories she kept tucked behind her steady posture. Memories of birthdays she could not bring back. Memories of a sister she still missed. She stood perfectly still, waiting for whatever he would say next, unaware that her quiet presence had already begun reshaping the way he saw the world around him. Marissa stood perfectly still, the tea tray steady in her hands, as Dominic's gaze settled on her with a weight that felt gentle and heavy all at once. He did not speak right away, and in that pause the quiet of the hallway seemed to fold around them, wrapping the moment in a softness she did not quite understand. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than before, almost careful. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. "About last night." The air tightened around her. She looked down, focusing on the lemon slices on the tray, anything to keep her composure from slipping. "I apologize if I overstepped," she said quickly. "The wrapping paper was torn. I only meant to help." Dominic shook his head, and she sensed rather than saw the motion. "I know you were helping. That is why I wanted to speak to you." She lifted her eyes slightly, just enough to see him watching her with an expression that looked nothing like the guarded authority he showed the world. It was something quieter, something she had never expected. "You put a lot of care into it," he continued. "More than anyone would have asked." Her fingers tensed against the tray's handle. She inhaled softly, trying to protect the small, fragile truth sitting behind her ribs. "Some things deserve care," she said. It was the safest answer she could give. Dominic seemed to consider that. Then his gaze softened. Not with pity, but with understanding. Was it for someone? The question slipped into the air like a whisper, and Marissa's breath faltered. For a moment, she could only blink at him, her throat tight. She had been so careful to keep her memories tucked away, to hide them behind long workdays and quiet nights. But now, standing in front of him, she felt something inside her shift, like a door easing open. She lowered her eyes. "My sister," she said softly. The words came out shaped by grief, but held steady by love. "She used to get so excited about birthdays. I was always the one who wrapped her gifts. She liked the ribbons the best." Dominic's posture changed, almost imperceptibly, as if her words had reached a part of him not used to being touched. "You must miss her a great deal," he said quietly. Marissa nodded once, unable to trust her voice. She did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears were luxuries people in her position could not always afford. But her silence spoke clearly enough. Dominic glanced at the tea tray, then back at her. "Thank you for taking care of Evelyn's gift," he said. "But I think I understand now that you were caring for something else too." The simple acknowledgement settled over her like warm light, unexpected and disarming. She steadied the tray and gave a small, respectful nod before stepping past him to deliver the tea. As she walked away, she sensed that something intangible had changed, not just in the hallway or the house, but in the way Dominic Hale looked at her. Not as someone invisible, not as someone passing through his world unnoticed, but as someone carrying a tenderness he had not realized he needed to witness. And for the first time in a long while, Marissa felt seen. Marissa carried the last of the lunch service trays back into the kitchen, her steps quiet against the tiled floor, her thoughts still echoing with the unexpected gentleness in Dominic's voice earlier that morning. She set the tray down carefully, allowing herself one slow breath before turning to rinse the cups. The warm water steadied her hands, but her mind drifted to Leah, to birthdays filled with laughter and handmade bows, to a past she kept tucked beneath layers of composure. She had learned to live with the ache, but she had never expected anyone to notice it, let alone someone like Dominic Hale. As she wiped down the counter, she felt a subtle shift in the air, the faint sense of someone standing in the doorway. She turned and found Dominic there, leaning slightly against the frame, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable but softer than she had ever seen it. He nodded toward the clean trays. "You work harder than anyone here," he said. "You should take a break." Marissa offered a polite smile. "I will soon, sir." But Dominic shook his head, stepping into the room. "No, I mean today, right now." She blinked, unsure how to respond. She had never been singled out for anything, let alone encouraged to rest. He hesitated, then continued, his voice quieter. "I have something for you." Her breath caught. "For me?" Dominic reached into his jacket and removed a small box, similar in size to the one she had wrapped for Evelyn, but tied with a simple ribbon, understated and thoughtful. He placed it gently on the counter beside her. "I had this made this morning," he said. "It is not much, but I thought you might appreciate it." Marissa stared at the box, her heartbeat thudding softly in her chest. She did not reach for it. Sir, I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything, Dominic replied. Just open it when you are ready. She finally lifted the box with careful fingers, feeling the weight of it, both literal and emotional. She untied the ribbon, opening the lid slowly. Inside, nestled in soft fabric, was a small silver charm shaped like a ribbon bow. Elegant. Simple. The kind of bow Leah used to adore. Marissa's lips parted slightly as her breath trembled. Her hands remained steady, but something inside her shifted, like a cord quietly breaking. Dominic watched her, his voice a soft murmur. I know it cannot replace anything you lost, but I wanted you to have something that honors what mattered to you. Marissa closed her hand gently around the charm, not to hide it, but to hold it close. For the first time since she had arrived at the Hale estate, she allowed herself to meet Dominic's eyes fully. There was no pity in his expression, only recognition, only respect, only the quiet understanding she had needed, more than she realized. Thank you, she said, her voice steady but full. This means more than you know. Dominic gave a small nod, stepping back as if giving her space was part of the gift. And in that quiet kitchen, filled with sunlight and the scent of warm water and lemon, something unspoken passed between them. Not obligation, not charity, something human, something healing, something that neither of them would forget. Marissa spent the rest of the afternoon moving through the estate with a calmness that felt different from her usual quiet composure. The small charm rested safely in her pocket, its weight light but meaningful, a reminder of a kindness she had never expected from a man whose world seemed built on sharp lines and strict edges. She kept her focus on her work, polishing the banister, checking the guest linens, straightening the framed photographs along the hall. Yet every so often, her fingers brushed against the charm, and a warmth spread through her chest, steadying her in a way she could not name. Near sunset, the house shifted into its evening rhythm. Golden light filtered through the tall windows, softening the dark wood floors and casting long shadows across the entryway. Marissa was adjusting a vase of fresh lilies on the console table when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Evelyn walking toward her, a bright smile lighting her face. Marissa, Evelyn said warmly, I wanted to thank you again for the gift. It meant a lot. I know my brother appreciates what you did. Marissa offered a modest nod. I am glad it was acceptable, Miss Hale. Evelyn studied her for a moment, her expression softening with curiosity. You remind me of someone I used to know, she said. Someone who carried a lot quietly, but still managed to make other people's lives brighter. Marissa did not know how to respond to that, so she simply bowed her head respectfully. Before Evelyn could say more, Dominic appeared at the top of the staircase, descending with the calm precision that always seemed to follow him. His eyes found Marissa immediately, not in a commanding way, but with a subtle awareness that made her pulse quicken. Evelyn glanced between them with a knowing tilt of her head, but said nothing as she excused herself, disappearing down the hall. Dominic continued his descent, the fading sunlight, brushing over his shoulders. When he reached the last step, he paused, his gaze fixed on Marissa with quiet intention. How was the rest of your day, he asked. There was no formality in his tone, only sincerity. Marissa folded her hands gently in front of her. It was peaceful, sir. Thank you for asking. Dominic stepped closer, stopping just a respectful distance away. I am glad to hear that. His eyes drifted briefly to the hand resting near her pocket, as though he knew the charm was there, as though he understood what it meant for her to carry it. You deserve peaceful days, he said. The words were simple, but they landed with a weight that made her heart tighten. No one had said anything like that to her in years. She offered a small, steady smile, one that reached her eyes. I will do my best to make them so, sir. Dominic held her gaze for a moment longer, a quiet understanding passing between them like a soft current. Then he nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement, and stepped aside so she could continue with her evening tasks. As Marissa walked past him, the scent of polished wood and evening air lingering around them, she felt something shift again, gentle and certain. Whatever this connection was, it was no longer a moment or an accident. It was something unfolding, quietly, like a ribbon being untied. Evening settled deeper into the estate, wrapping the rooms in a warm hush, the kind that made footsteps sound softer and thoughts drift nearer to the surface. Marissa finished polishing the last of the silverware in the dining room, her movements steady and practiced, though her heart carried a quiet flutter she tried not to acknowledge. The charm in her pocket pressed lightly against her palm each time she moved, a small reassurance that felt almost like a hand resting over her own. She extinguished one of the wall sconces when she heard a gentle tap of knuckles against the doorway. Dominic stood there, not imposing, not demanding, simply present. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, his tie loosened, a rare sign that the day had finally slipped from his shoulders. He spoke in a tone softened by the late hour. "Do you have a moment?" Marissa straightened instinctively, nodding. "Of course, sir." Dominic stepped into the room, his gaze flicking briefly toward the silverware she had arranged in perfect alignment, but it was clear he had not come to check her work. His focus returned to her with an attention that felt both careful and sincere. "I wanted to ask how you were settling in here," he said. "I know this house can feel overwhelming." Marissa paused, unsure how honest she should allow herself to be. "It is a beautiful place," she replied, "and I am grateful to work here." Dominic took a slow breath, as though weighing something more personal behind her answer. "Beautiful can still be lonely," he said, "especially when you are carrying something heavy." Her fingers curled slightly near her apron, brushing the outline of the charm. She looked down, not out of fear, but to steady the emotion rising within her. "I am managing the best I can," she said softly. Dominic nodded, but he did not step back or break the moment. Instead, he took another quiet step toward the table, picking up a polished spoon and studying his faint reflection in its curve. "When Evelyn and I were younger," he began, "she used to hide notes in the drawers of this dining room. Little reminders for me to slow down, to breathe, to remember that not everything needed to be carried alone." He set the spoon down gently and met Marissa's eyes. "You remind me of that, of someone trying to hold the world steady without letting anyone see the strain." Marissa felt something inside her shift, a small unraveling of the guard she wore every day. She had spent so long trying to appear composed, to bury her grief beneath routine, that hearing someone recognize the effort felt unexpectedly tender. "I do not mean to burden anyone," she said quietly. "I just try to do my work well." "You do more than that," Dominic replied. "You bring a kind of calm this house has not had in a long time." The words lingered in the air, gentle and sincere. Marissa held his gaze for a brief moment before lowering her eyes, her voice steady but full. "Thank you, sir. That is kind of you to say." Dominic nodded once, as if acknowledging a truth they both felt but neither needed to name aloud. Then he stepped back toward the doorway, pausing just long enough to look at her with the quiet understanding that had begun forming between them. And as he left the room, Marissa remained by the polished table, one hand resting near her pocket, feeling the ribbon charm warm against her skin, a reminder that healing sometimes began with the smallest, softest moments. The estate grew quieter as the evening stretched onward, the kind of quiet that softened the edges of the rooms and made the gentle hum of the lamps sound almost like a heartbeat. Marissa moved through the hallway with a basket of folded linens, her steps light against the polished floor, unaware that something significant had already begun shifting around her. She paused near the staircase landing, adjusting the basket in her arms just as Evelyn stepped out from the sitting room, her expression bright and curious. "There you are," Evelyn said warmly. "I was hoping to catch you before you finished for the night." Marissa offered a polite smile. "Is there anything you need, Miss Hale?" "Actually," Evelyn replied, lowering her voice with a playful seriousness, "I wanted to ask you about my brother." Marissa's breath caught slightly, though her expression remained composed. "Your brother?" "Yes," Evelyn said, leaning one shoulder against the wall. "He seems different, softer, in a good way, and he keeps talking about the house being calmer lately. That is not something he usually notices." Marissa felt a gentle warmth rise in her chest, though she quickly shook her head. "I am simply doing my job, Miss Hale." Evelyn studied her carefully, her smile widening with understanding. "Sometimes doing your job well means more than you realize." Before Marissa could respond, footsteps echoed from the end of the hall, steady and familiar. Dominic approached with his hands in his pockets, his expression thoughtful but softening the moment he saw them. "Interrupting something?" he asked, glancing briefly at his sister. Evelyn lifted her brows. "Not at all. Just enjoying a conversation." She brushed his arm as she passed him. "Good night, you two." Dominic watched her go before turning back to Marissa, his gaze dipping briefly to the basket she carried. "You should not have to finish all of that alone," he said. "Let me help." The offer startled her enough that she almost tightened her hold on the basket. "Sir, I could not possibly allow that." "You are not allowing anything," Dominic said gently. "I am offering." He reached for a few linens, careful not to intrude, his movements respectful and measured. Marissa hesitated but allowed him to take them, watching as he folded one with a focus that almost made her smile. "You do not have to do this," she murmured. "I know," he replied. "But sometimes helping is not about obligation. Sometimes it is about understanding someone's day a little better." Marissa felt her heartbeat steady, touched by the simplicity of the gesture. They worked quietly side by side, placing the folded linens into the basket. The house felt warmer around them, the silence no longer empty but shared. When the task was done, Dominic lifted the basket lightly, carrying it as though it weighed nothing. "Let me walk you to the linen room," he said. She nodded, and together they moved down the hallway, the soft glow of the sconces following their steps. At the linen closet, he set the basket down and stepped back, watching her arrange the neatly folded stacks. When she finished, she turned to find him still there, his expression gentle, contemplative. "Marissa," he said quietly, "I hope you know that your presence here has changed more than just the order of the house." Her breath trembled at the edges, though she kept her voice steady. "I am grateful to be here, sir." He gave a small nod, the kind that carried more meaning than words. And in that hallway, framed in warm light and quiet understanding, something unspoken settled between them, not rushed, not demanded, simply recognized. Night embraced the Hale estate with a soft stillness, the kind that settled gently over every hallway and quiet room. Marissa finished placing the final linen on the shelf, her fingertips brushing the neatly folded edges as though sealing the day with one last careful gesture. When she turned, Dominic was still there, his posture relaxed, his expression carrying that same quiet understanding that had grown between them like a slow, steady light. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The house around them hummed with a gentle calm, the faint glow from the sconces warming the space between their breaths. Dominic exhaled softly, not out of frustration or exhaustion, but as if releasing a truth he had kept unspoken for too long. "Marissa," he said, his voice low and sincere, "there is something I realized today." She folded her hands loosely at her waist, waiting, her calm presence, inviting honesty without demanding it. "You spend so much of your time taking care of the small things," he continued, "the things most people overlook. But those small things, they are what make a home feel whole." Marissa lowered her gaze, humbled, unsure how to receive words that felt so different from anything she had heard before. "I only try to be useful, sir," she said. "You are more than useful," Dominic replied gently. "You bring a sense of peace to this place. To me." The sincerity in his tone reached her before the meaning fully settled in her chest. She looked up, her eyes steady but softened by the weight of everything unsaid. "I did not expect anyone to notice," she admitted. "People notice more than you think," Dominic said, "especially when kindness appears in quiet places." He stepped aside so she could pass him, but she stayed where she was, gathering the courage to speak a truth of her own. "When I fixed the gift," she said slowly, "I was not thinking about impressing anyone. I just remembered what it felt like to make something special for someone I cared about, someone I lost." Dominic's expression shifted with a depth she had rarely seen in him, a recognition of grief spoken in a language he understood. "Your sister," he said softly. She nodded. For a few heartbeats, the hallway held its breath. Dominic reached into his pocket, but not for another gift. Instead, he held out a small handkerchief, simple and white, offering it to her without a word. Not because she was crying, not because she needed pity, but because he understood that grief lived in moments, not only in tears. Marissa accepted it with both hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, sir." Dominic inclined his head gently, his gaze warm with respect. "Some promises do not end when the people we made them for cannot see them anymore," he said. "You honored yours last night." The words touched something deep within her, something tender and long protected. She held the handkerchief to her heart for a moment, then let her hands fall calmly to her sides. "It means a great deal to hear that," she said. Dominic stepped back just enough to give her space, though his presence remained steady and supportive. "Good night, Marissa," he said, his tone carrying a quiet promise. "Rest well." She offered a small, genuine smile, the kind that reached her eyes and softened the edges of the world around them. "Good night, sir." As she walked down the hallway toward the staff wing, the soft glow of the sconces guiding her steps, Dominic watched her with a thoughtful stillness. And in that peaceful silence, broken only by the faint rustle of her footsteps, he finally understood the depth of her tears, the strength behind her quiet, and the silent grace that had begun to change his world without a single demand. And that night, the house felt different, warmer, as if dignity itself had taken its rightful place in the quiet corners where kindness lived.